Led a leadership meeting where C-level imposed strict work-from-home standards, forcing us to awkwardly dismiss family and pets. I hold a senior position at a mid-sized company, and ever since March, we've all been working from home. This week, something came up in a leadership meeting that rattled me, and I can't stop thinking about it. The C-level has made a decision to roll out new work-from-home standards that every employee is expected to follow. That includes a strict dress code during video calls, making sure our backgrounds are always neat and tidy, and, what really got me, a firm mandate to eliminate distractions, which mainly means pets, kids, and other family members should be out of sight and earshot. They actually held up a few examples of good employee behavior, like someone who locked their dog in a bedroom during a meeting and another who drove across town to arrange childcare with a relative. No one really clarified what sparked all this, or how, exactly, it's going to be enforced. All we were told is that now that we've been home for 6 months, you should be used to it, and should make changes to make your home more of a professional space. That part about distractions made me inwardly cringe. Right now, our region has reopened only to mostly close again, kids are all stuck doing distance learning, and so many people are sharing their limited space with their families or multiple roommates. Most people I manage don't even have a dedicated office, they're doing their best, squeezed into bedrooms or living rooms, juggling kids and partners and pets. In my own case, I have a very large dog. He's generally content napping through my workday, but every so often he wants to hop up and gaze dramatically out the window behind my desk. If I even try to shut him in another room, he howls, so trust me, that isn't any less of a distraction. What makes it all worse is that the company keeps insisting that we'll be back in the office the moment we're off the COVID watch list. But they refuse to say how long we'll definitely be working from home. I've asked outright if they can just give me some minimum date, something to pass on to my staff, like, you'll be remote at least until January 31st. The answer is always the same, nothing concrete. They just want us back as soon as possible, no matter how this all plays out. I'm struggling with how to communicate this to my team. I get the bit about looking presentable and keeping backgrounds neat, or just using a Zoom background if you don't want to clean. But this demand to completely eliminate distractions, I can't get behind it, and I have no idea how I'd even enforce it. The realities at home just don't mesh with that expectation, no matter what leadership tries to insist. Update 1. The work-from-home standards at my company still haven't been released. Some of our leadership got caught up in local drama, and I think the whole thing just slipped off their radar for now. What frustrates me most is how out of touch our leadership is with regular employees. I became a manager right as COVID hit, and I don't have strong relationships with my peers in leadership roles yet. Honestly, I've never felt comfortable reaching out to them. All of my peers appear to support the standards, and it's clear they're as annoyed as I am that we haven't seen changes yet. But it isn't just this. The whole atmosphere at work has been grinding me down. For example, I've been told I rate my staff too highly in their annual evaluations, and then, in the same breath, I'm told that even if my team is performing at a high level, I should still lower their scores to motivate them to do better. Apparently, making people feel unappreciated is what drives performance. It doesn't stop there. I keep hearing that I don't work enough hours when I regularly log 60+ hours every week. I'm also encouraged not to give my staff raises or bonuses unless they're truly exceptional performers. Can you believe that making an immediate switch from working in office to handling everything remotely during a pandemic, and consistently outperforming expectations, still isn't enough to justify even a 1% raise? I disagree with this so much, and I keep pushing back, but my protests just disappear into the void. Some people have said this is exactly why it's important to ask employers how they handled COVID, and, honestly, I can't sing my company's praises on that front. It's disappointing, because I genuinely love what I do. I like my team. I care about our organization's mission. No other job has ever meant this much to me. But at the end of the day, it is just a job. My employer might expect it to be the #1 priority in my life, but it never will be. I uprooted my entire life, moved 500 miles to a city where I knew no one, all on my own dime, for this job, because I knew they'd yank the offer if I didn't. After all this, I feel like I'm constantly being reprimanded for not appearing to work hard enough. I'll sign off after an 11-hour workday because I have to buy groceries, or I'll take an hour away to bring my dog to the vet, and suddenly it's an issue. Right now, I'm not quite ready to start job hunting, but I know I will be within the next year or so. I have no desire to burn out, and I'm not going to let this job drain everything out of me. Update 2. While there isn't a whole lot to report on the never implemented work-from-home standards, things at my company have certainly taken a dramatic and unexpected turn. From the outside, it seems obvious now. Our culture is deeply dysfunctional, though, during those months of working from home, it was relatively easy to ignore. As soon as the process of returning to the office began, right around when our area was becoming a COVID Delta variant hotspot, the C-suite brushed off concerns and decided that it was probably fine. The irony wasn't lost on me, considering our organization played a part in our county's ancillary COVID response. We weren't frontline health professionals, but we understood the stakes. Leadership just got tired of COVID getting in the way of business, or so it seemed. My team was among the last waves to head back to the office, and immediately, everything started to unravel. Unvaccinated people roamed around unmasked, COVID exposures became routine, most who got sick were vaccinated, which made it even more infuriating, and every safety measure that should have been in place was ignored. To top it off, the CEO took to patrolling the hallways, apparently deciding this was the best use of his time, spying on who was actually working on site. But the real breaking point came during a recent all-management meeting. The upper management, our CEO and COO, ripped into everyone who'd worked from home during the pandemic, berating us as if we were children caught sneaking out after curfew. According to them, work should have come before everything else in our lives. They said we should have fought to physically show up, defying even the county's stay-home orders. Because we chose to protect ourselves, families, and the community, all of us were now deemed low performers in their eyes, regardless of how hard we'd worked, the extra COVID response work we'd taken on, or the revenue we'd brought in. From that day forward, working from home was officially off the table for all but the rarest of exceptions, cases requiring the CEO's personal stamp of approval. Apparently, working from home was a vacation, and our supposed lack of dedication meant none of us deserved flexibility. I don't think it will surprise anyone when I say that 5 people, out of 75, resigned, all within a week of that meeting. And it's not just them. Plenty of others are now actively hunting for new jobs, myself included. However we performed, it's clear we'll always be branded as low performers. This is no longer just words. My department's budget, and those of several department heads whose teams worked remotely, got slashed for the next fiscal year. Raises and bonuses? Frozen. In the same breath, they announced a big promotion, hefty raise, and budget expansion for the one employee who'd openly defied stay-home orders and kept coming into the office during lockdown. I can't help but see the hypocrisy here. When I took this manager job in late March 2020, all my HR instructions were explicit: stay home, keep your team home, and wait for further notice. Yet now, it's clear those instructions were just about maintaining a proper paper trail. Apparently, I should have been psychic enough to know we were expected to be in the office regardless. And as for parents with kids at home from closed schools? Clearly, not a single person in our all-male C-suite had to worry about that. Every one of their wives stays home, so the unique burden simply didn't register. On the upside, some of the major projects I've led have gotten notable positive publicity lately. This means recruiters have been reaching out to me more and more in the past few months. Nothing has landed yet, but with the office's toxicity now at an all-time high, I've officially thrown myself into job hunting mode too. When I moved here for this job, I didn't know a soul, still don't, after nearly 2 isolated years. Owning a house to flip has kept my mind busy, but this whole ordeal has forced me to reconsider whether I'm ever again willing to let my job dictate where I live. I've decided, I absolutely will not. From now on, I'm only seeking fully remote positions. What's especially encouraging is how the interviews I've had lately are a world apart from those I had pre-pandemic. Now I've got hiring managers reaching out to me first, trying hard to convince me to join their teams, and I'm not desperate, I'm the one turning them down. Honestly, that gives me real hope for what's next. Update 3. I'm still with the company, though a lot has shifted since my last update. January brought a whirlwind of changes. There was this undeniable mass exodus, with resignation letters flying in left and right. Once people started leaving at that pace, my boss, one of the few VPs who stayed, and also a single parent, made a bold move. They announced that our teams would only be going back to the office 1 day a week, no exceptions. I have no idea what went down in their conversation with the CEO, but ever since, we've officially been in the office just that 1 day. Around the same time, I got tangled up in a ski accident. It set my job search on pause, but I managed to recover fully. One bright spot in this job is the truly great health insurance and the incredibly generous sick leave. I had all the time I needed to heal up and make my rounds at follow-up appointments. The newfound freedom also emboldened me to start traveling again, finally, for both work and pleasure, after years of being sidelined by COVID. That change did wonders for my mental health. Initially, I thought I'd be recounting an endless series of ridiculous company antics. Believe me, there have been more than enough. But once the dust settled and we were slated only for one in-office day, I found myself completely tuning out the office drama. Sure, there were committees I could have joined, meetings about improving company culture I could have sat in on, but with zero real results from them, I started seeing the bigger picture. All the crazy stuff floating around wasn't touching me or my staff. The company, for all its internal chaos, wasn't targeting my department. In fact, we kind of became invisible, which suited us perfectly since we're a small squad with a reputation for delivering. I've always believed in being a people-first manager, so instead of wasting energy railing against the system, I threw myself into managing. Along the way, I uncovered a trove of company benefits I'd never noticed. Determined to squeeze every bit of value out of them, I started acting. I took my team out for lunch regularly, discovering we had a whole budget for staff lunches each year. Technically, it's for lunch meetings, but I took us all out to restaurants and made it about anything but work. I made sure both myself and my team wrung every cent out of our professional development budgets, signing up for classes that have helped me grow as a manager and as a person, and guiding my staff to find the same kind of opportunities. I made it a rule to use all my vacation time this year, and mapped out a plan to do the same next year. That's my advice to everyone, especially if you're a manager or always feel too busy. Use that time. With that in mind, I also nudged my team to take their vacations and tried to make it as seamless as possible. At one point, everyone requested a day off, so I just closed the department for the day. One of my favorite moments was promoting my strongest performer into a new role and giving them a much-deserved raise. When I realized we had extra money left in our department's office supply budget, I spent it all on ergonomic upgrades for the team. Mental health days, sometimes just partial ones, have become part of my toolkit too, and I always urge my staff to take whatever time they need for their own well-being. Looking back on 2022, I'm proud to say I'm the only manager who didn't lose a single team member. I owe a special thanks to my boss, for whatever magic they worked so we only need to show up once a week. It's clear the real issue was never about physical presence, but about whether staff feel valued and respected. My boss doesn't control all the dysfunction around here, but they genuinely strive to make our work environment as positive as it can be. On their teams, I feel recognized and appreciated. As for the future, I'm likely to head out in a year or two to move closer to family, or sooner, if my boss moves on. For now, though, as long as things keep running as smoothly as they are, I actually feel good about staying a little longer than I'd once planned. Update 4. About a month ago, my company made a big announcement, a solid cost of living raise for all staff. I felt a rush of relief. With inflation soaring past 12% in my area this year, that raise was a lifeline. But today, the air went cold. I found out they're backtracking on that promise. Any raises going forward are now merit-based, and capped at just 3%. It was like the floor dropped out from under me. What made it so much worse was the reasoning. The organization wants to make a significant political donation, but apparently, they don't have the funds for it, so they're scraping together the money from what was meant for our raises. They're literally taking away the cost of living adjustments we were promised and rerouting that cash just so they can write a bigger check to a politician. Honestly, I've had enough. This was the last straw. Time for me to dust off my resume and start my job hunt again. Update 5. I have some wonderful news to share. I had to put my job search on hold because I needed surgery and ended up on medical leave for 3 months. When I finally returned, I found out that the longtime operations manager, who had always been the right hand to the COO, had left for another opportunity. You wouldn't believe what happened next. After this operations manager was gone, we discovered that they'd fabricated all of those ridiculous policies and claimed they were coming straight from our CEO or COO. Even the supposed cost of living raises that everyone was buzzing about, they never even existed. I'm not sure what the endgame was there, but none of it had actually been approved by the higher-ups. With this one person gone, everything changed almost overnight. Yes, the C-suite's lack of involvement had been a factor, but the entire atmosphere improved dramatically as soon as their influence disappeared. We kept uncovering more sketchy things they'd left behind, and I know there's still a fair bit of cleanup left to do. The new operations manager is a breath of fresh air, down to earth, reasonable, and genuinely invested in making things better. Since she came on board, the cultural shift has been incredible. On top of all that, I'm currently interviewing for 2 amazing roles outside the company, both in cities where I'd be closer to friends and family. I'm feeling really optimistic, and with any luck, I'll find myself in an exciting new position in 2024. Update 6. 2 things hit at once and knocked the wind out of me. I was halfway through final interviews with both roles I mentioned, feeling guardedly hopeful, when my boss called me into their office and told me they'd accepted a new job out of state. Effective immediately, I was the obvious choice to step in as interim VP while they wrapped up. That same afternoon, I got an offer from one of the roles I'd been courting. Fully remote, work I'm excited about, a real leadership seat at the table, and a comp package that didn't make me do the math twice to see if it was a typo. The contrast was jarring. My own company wanted me to steady the ship indefinitely, 4 days a week on site, and we'll revisit compensation later. The other team wanted me as I am, dog and all, and asked what hours would support my life. In the middle of that whiplash, the last of the rubble from our old operations manager's reign started turning up. The board quietly brought in an outside firm to comb through our policies and budgets. It didn't stay quiet for long. They found entire policy packets that had never been reviewed by anyone but our ex-ops manager, slick PDF memos with leadership letterhead and signatures that turned out to be cut-and-paste jobs. They also found a special initiatives line in our budget that had ballooned during the pandemic, paid out to vendors none of us had ever heard of. When the auditors pulled the threads, half of the money had gone to vanity projects that made leadership feel busy, branding exercises, a lobby experience no one asked for, random consultants billing premium rates to produce binders no one opened. Meanwhile, those we can't afford it speeches about raises were built on spreadsheets she'd trimmed to the bone. The board dragged everyone into a town hall and, for the first time since I've worked here, the CEO spoke plainly. He admitted they delegated too much, apologized for not catching the mess sooner, and said the audits weren't done. Then he did something I never expected. He announced a formal remote and hybrid policy aligned to the work itself, with outcomes-based performance measures and explicit language that family care interruptions and pets in the background aren't performance issues. It felt like the company I'd wanted us to be had finally crawled out of the wreckage and stood up. I wish that had landed differently for me. I went home and sat with it. The policy was exactly what I'd pushed for years ago, and the cultural shift with our new ops manager was still real. But the idea of hitching myself to interim while they ran more audits and promised they'd get back to me made my stomach tighten. I sent a careful, gracious acceptance to the remote offer the next morning. Telling my team was the hardest part. I gave a little more notice than strictly necessary and built a transition plan with my current boss and the new ops manager. We carved out time for shadowing, documented everything we could think of, and handed off my big projects cleanly. My team took me out for breakfast on our one-in-office day and insisted on picking up the check, which made me laugh because I've been flagrantly draining our lunch budget on them for 2 years. My dog sprawled under the table like a throw rug and the server brought him a water bowl and a piece of bacon, which felt like the right send-off. Leadership tried to counter. They offered to make the interim title permanent, and they found money once there was a real risk I'd walk out with it. They wanted more office time than I was willing to give, and they couldn't domesticate the one thing that finally tipped the balance for me. I don't want to twist myself into a shape that works for my job anymore. I want a job that fits my life. My soon-to-be former boss hugged me in the parking lot and told me I was doing the right thing. The CEO sent a surprisingly gracious note, thanking me for holding things together through a difficult chapter. The new ops manager left a plan on my desk with a card that said, "You built something worth keeping. We'll take care of it." I started last week. On my first morning, my new manager blocked off half an hour on my calendar titled "How You Work Best," and actually meant it. We talked about travel I want to do this summer to see my family and how to build our deadlines around that. In our team stand-up, someone's toddler appeared in a dinosaur costume and everyone waved. No one made a face. My dog did his dramatic window gaze in the background, sighed, and fell asleep, and the only comment I got was, "Excellent office mate. I'm staying in my house a little longer to finish the flip, then I'm packing up and moving closer to my people." I'm going to miss my team here more than I can say, but leaving on good terms and watching the cleanup start in earnest is a relief I didn't know I needed. For the first time since March 2020, it feels like I'm not bracing for whatever's next, I'm walking toward it. Update 7. 2 weeks into the new job, my calendar pinged with a meeting invite and the client name made my stomach flip. My old company. It wasn't a prank. My new team had been building a proposal for them for months, and the timeline just happened to land right after I started. The call was set for a Thursday morning. I made coffee, put a chew toy in front of the dog, and clicked join. The first tile that popped up was our new ops manager. She grinned when she saw me and said, "Well, this is efficient," and that broke the tension. A few familiar faces filtered in after that. My old team lead wearing the sweater I gave them for graduating their certification, the administrator who always brings homemade cookies to in-person meetings, a couple of folks I'd only ever seen in profile photos. No CEO. No COO. The board had accepted the CEO's retirement the week before, apparently accelerated by the findings, and named the ops manager interim COO. It's hard to explain the emotion of seeing someone who quietly did the right things land in a chair where they could actually steer. We went straight into the work. The project they wanted from us intersected with a process I'd built from scratch last year, and it turns out spending 45 minutes describing your own fingerprints without letting on their yours is an oddly satisfying exercise. When someone asked an arcane question about why a particular deliverable had to be sequenced the way it was, I watched my old team lead speak up with the same level of ownership I used to. They didn't look to me. They didn't need to. It was one of the cleanest handoffs I've been a part of, and it happened without anyone saying the word handoff. After the call, the interim COO messaged me to say thank you and asked if I was open to being interviewed by the outside firm finishing the audit. I said yes. The next day I sat in my office with my dog pressed against my chair and walked 2 auditors through 18 months of "Is this normal?" They'd already traced the fake policy packets back to a private Gmail and a Canva account under a fake alias, but they were missing the context for why certain things had landed so hard. I told them about the hallway patrols. I told them about the example stories people were held up against, locking dogs away, driving kids across town, stuff I hadn't thought about in months that still made my jaw clench. They didn't flinch and they didn't interrupt. One of them just asked, softly, "What did you do to keep your team from absorbing that?" I realized halfway through my answer that I was finally telling the story to someone whose job was to fix it. The following week, a local business journal ran a piece about misstewardship of funds and procurement irregularities, and there was the lobby experience in glossy high-res, looking like a tiny museum exhibit for a company no one had heard of. The article didn't name the former ops manager beyond a former executive, and my name wasn't in it at all, but I read it with a complicated mix of relief and sadness. Some of the restitution will go toward restoring frozen raises and making corrections. It's not everything, but it's not nothing. My former team lead sent me a photo of our old break room with a handwritten sign taped to the fridge, "Back pay Friday." Someone had drawn a smiley face with sunglasses. My own days have felt like a study in contrasts. My new manager schedules no meeting days and actually cancels meetings when they leak onto the calendar. I got a home office stipend the day I signed and spent it on a better chair and an absurdly plush dog bed that my dog refuses to use unless I put it exactly in the stripe of sunlight that crosses the floor at 10 a.m. On my second Friday, our CFO messaged me to ask for my mailing address, and a week later a small box showed up with a company bandana for my dog and a handwritten note, "For your excellent office mate." It shouldn't be remarkable to be treated like a person, but it still is. We launched my first project here without a standing status meeting in sight. I built a half-page how I work doc like everyone else and included "I answer DMs faster than email. Mornings are for deep work. I live in a place with occasional power flickers, and yes, that's my dog. Nobody batted an eye. The team has a running unspoken competition to have the most chaotic background cameo. The current winner is a colleague whose cat learned to open a door on camera and then did it again, on cue. When a teammate's daycare closed for a week, she typed, "Heads up, I'm going to be asynchronous," and shut her laptop at 3 p.m. every day. Nothing fell apart. In the middle of all of this, I finally put my house on the market. It went under contract after one open house. The buyer left a note about how the light in the living room made them feel calmer, and it felt like the right person getting the keys. I packed my life into 3 moving cubes and drove north with the dog riding shotgun, a battered rubber chicken squeaking once every 20 miles like a metronome for the road. We stopped at a gas station where a teenager crouched down, asked if he could pet the dog, and then told me he'd never seen a dog look like a throw blanket that size. He's not wrong. The first morning in my new place, I made coffee and opened my laptop at a folding table and realized my calendar was already blocked the following week for a focus sprint my team rotates every quarter. It's literal time on the calendar where alerts get turned off and everyone dives into one meaty thing. I used it to write a strategy doc for a cross-team project that had been foggy at the edges. At the end of the sprint, my manager pinged, "Show me the messy draft," and gave me feedback in voice notes while walking his dog around a lake. I don't think I've ever felt less performative at work. My old boss called to tell me they'd clicked into their new role and were thriving. The interim COO sent another message, this time a photo of a printed remote/hybrid policy with signatures that were real, not cut and pasted, and a line underlined in yellow, "Family care and household life are not performance issues." It was sitting on my old desk, next to the plant she left me, which my team rescued and watered and somehow kept alive. She wrote, "I thought you'd want to see that this actually made it to paper. We signed the contract with my former company. I'll be the point person on our side. If you told me a year ago that I'd be working with them again, I would have laughed. It feels surprisingly uncomplicated. They're trying to be something different, and on my end, I'm doing the work I wanted to do all along." On our kickoff call, my old team lead did a little wave at my dog when he clambered into frame and said, "Good to see you, dude." The dog thumped his tail once and went back to sleep. We had work to do, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like everyone on both sides of the screen was building something instead of bracing. Update 8. The first time I walked back into my old office, I had a vendor badge stuck to my shirt and a tote bag full of sticky notes. The lobby experience was mid-transformation. Half of it had been hauled away, leaving a rectangle of brighter paint and a faint adhesive outline on the wall like a ghost frame. Someone had dragged a big ficus into the empty space and strung it with paper cranes. The security guard who used to give me grief about my coffee thermos looked up, did a double take, and said, "You look less stressed," which might be the best compliment I've ever gotten in that building. We were there to run a 2-day discovery sprint, the kind where you write on glass walls and leave a trail of sugar from the pastry boxes. The interim COO met us at the conference room door with sleeves rolled up and an actual notebook. It took a beat for my muscle memory not to pull my chair to the head of the table. Half the room was familiar and half wasn't. New hires with fresh keycards and my old team lead sitting with their back to the whiteboard like they'd always belonged there. On the door, someone had taped up a printed copy of the remote/hybrid policy with a highlighter streak under "Family care and household life are not performance issues," just in case anyone forgot which building they were in. We got 3 hours in before the fire alarm went off. I have never been outside that building with that many people not having a bad day. We carried our markers and a flip chart down the stairs like a parade float, and someone ran back for tape. In the parking lot, we taped a sheet to a metal railing and kept going. A maintenance guy propped the door with a caution cone and pointed a fan at us to cut the heat. At one point a woman from HR realized she could write on the tinted window with a dry erase and started sketching like it was the most obvious thing in the world. A passerby asked if we were filming a commercial. We laughed without that brittle note I'd heard for years, finished the exercise, clapped for the team that solved the impossible sequencing puzzle faster than I ever have, and ate sandwiches on the curb. It felt like a scene from a company video I would not have made fun of. Back at my new job that evening, my calendar had a hold on it from legal. Subject line, subpoena. One of the vendors from the special initiatives bucket had filed a civil suit and my name made the list for deposition because my email showed I'd pushed back on some of the purchases. I sat at my desk with my dog draped over my feet and answered questions into a laptop for 2 hours. The opposing counsel tried the polite version of, "Are you sure you remember it that way?" And I said yes more times than I've said it in my life. When they asked about the policy packets with the cut and paste signatures, I said the thing I wish I'd said when it was happening. It didn't just waste money, it made people feel like they were losing their minds. After we adjourned, my dog stretched so hard his back toes tapped the floor like a metronome. The next week, I got a short email from the auditors I'd met with months back. Referral made, additional restitution likely, thank you for your time. No victory laps, just a small, square piece of closure. Our project moved quickly after that. The interim COO stopped being interim and the announcement came with a photo of her in the same blazer she wore the day we taped paper to the railing. She signed our kickoff document in actual wet ink, which nobody asked her to do and everyone noticed anyway. We designed the workflow my old team has been limping along without since that ops manager era process that was just walls of flowchart arrows pointing to nowhere. The best moment was watching my old team lead argue with me about their timeline in a way that meant they were owning it. We hit the first milestone early because somebody in the room suggested putting the messy draft in front of the end users sooner, and nobody said, but the optics. In the middle of all this, we had a week of storms in my new city that turned the sky the color of bruised peaches and knocked my power out twice. At my last job, I would have turned my phone flashlight on and kept typing from the floor like I was in a bunker. This time I shut my laptop, lit a candle, and texted my manager, going asynchronous, "See you when the grid decides." He sent back a photo of his dog in a raincoat and told me to read my book. We rescheduled a client check-in without anyone making a face. The next morning the sunlight came in like a clean sheet and my internet blinked back to life, and the only trace was a funny Slack thread about who has the most absurd emergency lamp. 2 months after we signed, the board chair at my old company asked if I'd facilitate a session with them about outcomes over optics. The phrase made me laugh out loud, but we set it up. We did it in a smaller room, no dais, everyone with the same laptop stand and a refillable water bottle like it was the tiniest revolution. I told them about the day we ran a workshop on a railing in the parking lot and how nothing fell apart. The chair wrote it down like it was an action item. I got one more surprise from my old life, a calendar invite that looked like nothing, labeled Office Walk, from the COO. When I showed up, she led me through spaces I'd never had time to notice. The old experience space had been sanded and repainted a soft white. A local artist had installed a grid of small shelves holding photos and notes from staff, kids in dinosaur costumes, a grandmother on a birthday Zoom, a dog gazing dramatically out a window I recognized. Someone had printed one of my dog's onboarding bandana photos from my new company and tucked it onto a shelf, crooked. The COO said, "We asked people to bring in one picture that represented a real life at work." I stood there with my tote bag and my vendor badge thinking about how bizarre it is to watch a place grow up after you stop living in it. On our last day of the sprint, we had leftover time and I didn't want to fill it with a parking lot. We pulled out a fresh sheet and wrote down the parts of the project we were still worried about. The COO picked the stickiest one and said she'd take it herself, then looked at my old team lead and said, "And if you tell me you need help, I won't call it a development opportunity." It's a tiny sentence, but I wrote it on the bottom of my notebook like a souvenir. Back at my new job, my team shipped another project without a standing status meeting and then went right into a focus week. I took a train to see my sister and worked in the dining room while she tried to teach me how to make a pie crust and her toddler kept handing me a plastic onion. One morning, my manager and I did one-on-ones while I walked the dog past a row of maple trees that were doing their best impression of fireworks, and we talked about what next looks like here. He wants me to build out a small practice in the niche I fell into at the last place and then carved into something cleaner here. The idea that I get to hire on purpose, without ever once saying, "We'll revisit compensation later," makes my brain light up. I told him I want to do it slow and right. He said, "Good," like I'd given the only answer that made sense. The article about the civil suit hit a few weeks later. No names, again, just phrases like forged authentication, unauthorized procurement, stipulated restitution. It was another complicated swallow, vindication without gloating. The part that stuck with me was a line about how the company would be setting aside funds for retroactive retirement contributions that had been frozen. A photo showed a staff memo on a bulletin board, catch-up deposit date, Friday. Someone had drawn a smiley face with sunglasses. My old team lead sent me a picture of a stack of new chairs waiting in the hallway for the department that always gets last year's models. The sign on them said, "Ergonomic upgrades, finally," with a heart around the word finally. I ended that week where I end a lot of them now, at my tiny kitchen table with the late sun turning the room honey-colored, my dog arranged like a spilled blanket under my chair, my laptop closed. The contract with my old company has a phase 2 we haven't scoped yet. My manager wants me to present at a conference about distributed work that doesn't make people cry. I don't know what this chapter is going to look like on paper. For now, the story feels less like a list of things that happened to me and more like a string I'm getting to pull on purpose. The dog did his dramatic window gaze, saw absolutely nothing happening on the street outside, and sighed like he'd just closed a deal. He's not wrong.